The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as the gargantuan human warship, bristling with more weapons than an entire alien armada, emerged from hyperspace. A grizzled old veteran named Daniel Grant sat hunched over the bar, sipping a potent alien liquor that would melt the insides of most species. The dingy station cantina was a far cry from the gleaming decks of a warship, but it still felt more like home than Earth. An anxious grey alien with oversized black eyes approached Daniel cautiously. "Are you the human who fought in the Carrion War?" the alien asked, its reedy voice quivering. Daniel narrowed his eyes and nodded once. The alien slid onto the stool next to him. The human downed his drink in a single swig and slammed the glass on the bar, making Antares jump. Daniel leaned forward, the dim light illuminating the jagged plasma burn scar across his face, a permanent reminder of a battle won at a terrible cost. "You want to know about the UHS Indomitable?" It was a beast unlike anything this godforsaken galaxy had ever seen. When the Kyrians invaded, their ships outnumbered ours 100-1. They bombarded our colonies until continents cracked open. They slaughtered millions. The admirals were ready to surrender to their demands. Humanity was on its knees, about to be wiped out or enslaved by those sadistic bastards. The multi-armed reptilian bartender stopped polishing a glass, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the tension in the air. Daniel's flinty gaze unfocused as he recalled distant memories of fire and death. Just when all seemed lost, the Indomitable arrived. It was the most powerful vessel ever built by human hands, a project so secret that most of the crew weren't told about it until the day we left space dock to face the Kyrian horde. The admirals knew it was our last hope. If the Indomitable failed, humanity would fall. Antares leaned closer, enraptured. His research had hinted at the ship's importance, but he never imagined the stakes were so high. What made the Indomitable special? How could a single ship hope to stand against a whole armada? A fierce grin split Daniel's craggy face, pride and satisfaction etched in every line. The Indomitable was humanity's middle finger to the universe that wanted us dead. It had weapons and technology the Galactic Council had never seen before because their treaties banned them for being too powerful. But we were desperate. Let me tell you about the day it first faced the Kyrian fleet, the day that changed everything. Antares stared at Daniel, his bulbous black eyes unblinking. The bar had grown completely silent now, every patron riveted by the old soldier's tale. Daniel took another long pull from his drink, the potent liquor burning his throat. We could see it all from the Indomitable's bridge. The Kyrian ships were scrambling, their formation broken. Some tried to flee, but our gunners picked them off one by one. Others attempted to regroup and counterattack, but it was too late. The Indomitable's shields held firm against their puny weapons, while our own guns tore them apart. Daniel gestured with his hands, mimicking the motion of the great ship's guns. The particle beam cannon was just the beginning. We had missiles that could track a target through hyperspace, drones that could hack into a ship's systems and shut it down from the inside, and a railgun that fired projectiles at a fraction of the speed of light. The Kyrians never stood a chance. Antares leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. "What happened next? Did the Kyrians retreat?" Daniel shook his head. Not right away. They were too proud, too arrogant. They thought they could still win even with half their fleet in ruins. So they regrouped and came at us again, throwing everything they had at the Indomitable. He paused, his eyes distant. It was a slaughter. We tore through their ships like they were made of paper. Their fighters swarmed around us like angry bees, but our point defense systems swatted them out of the sky. In the end, only a handful of Kyrian ships managed to escape, limping back to their home world with their tails between their legs. Antares shook his head in disbelief. I had no idea the Indomitable was so powerful. How did the Galactic Council react when they learned of its existence? Daniel snorted. They were furious, of course. They accused us of violating their precious treaties, of upsetting the balance of power. But what choice did we have? The Kyrians would have wiped us out if we hadn't built the Indomitable. We did what we had to do to survive. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes hard. The Galactic Council can complain all they want, but they should be thanking us. The Indomitable didn't just save humanity, it saved the whole damn galaxy. Without us, the Kyrians would have conquered every star system from here to the galactic core. Antares nodded slowly, his mind reeling with the implications of Daniel's story. He had always thought of humans as a young, naive species, too weak to stand up to the older, more established races of the galaxy. But now he realized how wrong he had been. Humans were survivors, willing to do whatever it took to protect their own. And with ships like the Indomitable at their disposal, they were a force to be reckoned with. He took a sip of his drink, savoring the burn. And fight we did. The Indomitable became a legend, a symbol of human defiance in the face of impossible odds. The Kyrians learned to fear her name, and the other races of the galaxy learned to respect us. We had earned our place among the stars, and we would not let anyone take it from us. I watched as Daniel demonstrated the Sparrow's capabilities by linking his fingers together. His steely eyes met mine. The best pilots could join 4, 5, even 6 Sparrows into a single craft. A whole squadron could come together to form a ship to rival a Kyrian destroyer. My head swam, trying to picture the intricate dance of machinery and minds melding together in the heat of battle. I shook my head again, still processing the enormity of what he was telling me. How many Sparrows did the Indomitable carry? Daniel grinned, the lines around his eyes crinkling. She had a full complement of 60. When they swarmed the Kyrian fleet, it was a sight to behold. The Kyrians didn't know what hit them. He lifted his glass in a mock toast before taking another swig. The Sparrows darted around the enemy ships like angry wasps, stinging them with precision strikes. Then, just when the Kyrians thought they had a bead on them, the Sparrows would combine into a larger ship and unleash hell. I could almost see it in my mind's eye. The sleek, deadly Sparrows dancing through the void, their pilots' minds linked in perfect synchronicity. It was a testament to human ingenuity and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The Kyrians must have been terrified, I murmured, half to myself. Daniel nodded, his expression grim. They were. But they were also enraged. They couldn't understand how a bunch of upstart primates could best them in battle. It wounded their pride. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But the Sparrows were just one of the Indomitable's many secrets. She had other weapons, other technologies that the Kyrians couldn't even dream of. My eyes widened, my heart pounding in my chest. Like what? Daniel pauses, draining the last dregs from his glass. Antares watches him intently, the cantina's dim lighting casting shadows across the human's weathered face. The Galactic Council was in an uproar after the Indomitable's victory at Antares, Daniel says, setting his empty glass on the bar with a clink. The Kyrians were screaming for blood, demanding we hand over the Indomitable's secrets, but we held firm. He chuckles, a dry, humorless sound. The council chambers echoed with the Kyrians' outrage. They pounded their fists, their purple skin flushing darker with anger. The humans have violated galactic law, they shouted. Their new weapons threaten us all. Daniel shakes his head. But we had our supporters too. The Zephyrians, the Argosians, even the normally neutral Tellurians. They argued that we had every right to defend ourselves, that the Kyrians had brought this upon themselves with their unprovoked aggression. Antares nods, his large black eyes blinking slowly. I remember those debates. The council was deadlocked for weeks. Hi, Daniel agrees. But while the politicians bickered, the Indomitable was out there fighting. We knew the Kyrians wouldn't stop. Council be damned. So we took the fight to them. He leans forward, his voice dropping low. We hit their supply lines, their shipyards, their command posts. The Indomitable would decloak just long enough to unleash hell, then vanish again like a ghost. The Kyrians were frantic, never knowing where we'd strike next. Daniel barks a laugh. That's an understatement. They threw everything they had at us, hunter-killer drones, gravity mines, phase-shifting torpedoes. But the Indomitable was always one step ahead, thanks to her adaptive shielding and quantum encryption. He sobers, his eyes distant. But the Kyrians were relentless. They kept coming, wave after wave, throwing more ships and soldiers at us. Our losses started to mount. Good men and women vaporized or sucked out into the void. Anne-Therese lays a delicate grey hand on Daniel's arm. How did you keep going in the face of such odds? He slams his fist on the bar, making the glasses jump. And so we fought on, bloodied but unbroken. The Indomitable became more than a ship. She was a legend, a symbol of human defiance. The Kyrians came to fear her very name. The bartender leans in, his eyes narrowed. But you said they found a way to counter your technology. How? Daniel's jaw tightens. Espionage, bribery, torture. The Kyrians were desperate, and desperate enemies will do anything. They managed to steal some of our secrets, piece together a defense. It didn't happen all at once, but gradually, bit by bit, they chipped away at our advantage. He sighs, rubbing a hand over his grizzled face. The tide was turning, and we knew it. The Indomitable was still a formidable weapon, but she was no longer invincible. We needed a new edge, something the Kyrians would never see coming. Antares cocks his head. And did you find it? Daniel grins, a fierce predatory expression. Oh, we found it all right. The Forge Father, we called it. Daniel paused, his eyes glinting in the dim light of the cantina. He leaned forward, his voice low and intense. The Indomitable was dead in space, her engines shattered by the Kyrians' gravity weapon. We were sitting ducks, unable to maneuver or fight back. The Kyrian ships closed in, their weapons charging up for the kill. He took a swig of his drink, savoring the burn. But then something incredible happened. The Indomitable's nanobots, those tiny miracle workers, sprang into action. They swarmed over the damaged engines, rebuilding them molecule by molecule. Antares' eyes widened. How long did it take? Daniel chuckled. Minutes. In the time it took the Kyrians to line up their shots, the Indomitable's engines were back online. We surged forward, catching them completely off guard. He slammed his fist on the table, making the glasses jump. We hit them with everything we had. Our new shields absorbed their energy weapons and redirected them back at the Kyrian ships. Their hulls buckled and split under the onslaught. Daniel's voice was filled with fierce pride. The Indomitable tore through their formation like a hot knife through butter. The Kyrians scattered, trying to regroup, but it was too late. We pursued them relentlessly, picking them off one by one. Antares shook his head in amazement. Incredible. The Kyrians must have been in shock. They were, Daniel agreed. They thought they had us, thought the Indomitable was finished, but they underestimated the ingenuity and determination of the human spirit. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. That battle in the Sirius system turned the tide of the war. The Kyrians were on the back foot, reeling from the Indomitable's miraculous recovery and counterattack. Daniel's voice grew somber. But the war was far from over. The Kyrians still had plenty of fight left in them, and they were determined to crush the humans once and for all. He met Antares' gaze, his eyes hard. They threw everything they had at us. Fleets of ships, armies of soldiers, weapons that defied imagination, but the Indomitable and her crew refused to yield. Daniel's fist clenched on the table. We fought them across a dozen star systems, in battles that lit up the void like supernovas. We bled and died, but we never gave up. The Indomitable became more than a ship. She became a legend, a symbol of human defiance against impossible odds. He took a deep breath, the memories weighing heavily on him. But even legends can fall. The Kyrians were relentless, and they finally managed to corner the Indomitable in the Zeta Reticuli system. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. It was a trap, one we couldn't escape. The Kyrians hit us with a weapon we'd never seen before, a quantum destabilizer that tore through our shields like they were made of paper. He closed his eyes, the pain of the memory etched on his face. The Indomitable was crippled, her weapons offline, her engines failing. We were dead in space, surrounded by a Kyrian armada. They moved in for the kill, their ships bristling with guns. Antares leaned forward, his heart pounding. What happened? How did you survive? Daniel opened his eyes, a haunted look in their depths. We didn't. The Indomitable, the pride of the human fleet, the ship that had defied the odds time and time again, was destroyed. the Kyrians tore her apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but debris and echoes. He fell silent, the weight of the memory crushing him. Antares reached out, placing a hand on the old soldier's arm. "I'm sorry," the historian whispered. "I had no idea." Daniel shook his head. "Few do. The Galactic Council covered it up, not wanting to admit that their precious treaties had failed to prevent the bloodshed. They swept the Indomitable under the rug, along with all the brave men and women who died fighting for humanity's survival." He met Antares's gaze, a fierce light burning in his eyes. "But I remember, and as long as I draw breath I will make sure that the galaxy remembers too. The Indomitable may be gone, but her legacy lives on in the hearts and minds of every human who refuses to bow to tyranny and oppression." Daniel raised his glass, his voice ringing out in the sudden silence of the cantina. "To the Indomitable, and to all those who fought and died in her name. May their sacrifice never be forgotten." As they drank, the cantina seemed to fade away, replaced by the cold, hard vacuum of space. For a moment, Antares could almost see the Indomitable as she once was. A sleek, powerful vessel, bristling with weapons and armor, a beacon of hope in a galaxy consumed by war. And then the moment passed, and he was back in the dingy bar, listening to the hum of the air scrubbers and the clink of glasses. "They called it the Forge, Father," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A weapon to end all weapons, a device that could reshape the very fabric of the universe. And it was our last desperate hope to turn the tide against the Kyrians." Daniel met his gaze, a ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "All right," he said, "but be warned, this is not a tale for the faint of heart. The Forge, Father, was a weapon like no other, and the price we paid to wield it was higher than you can imagine." The Indomitable's crew raced against time in that battle above Sirius. In the engine room, engineers and nanobots worked in perfect unison, sparks flying as they modified the ship's systems. Lines of code streamed across the displays as the AI mapped out the anomaly generator's resonant frequency. On the bridge, the captain barked orders, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Kyrian ships loomed large, their weapons powering up for a final devastating salvo. But the crew of the Indomitable refused to yield. With mere seconds to spare, the modifications were complete. The ship's shields thrummed with power, recalibrated to emit the precise electromagnetic pulse needed to disrupt the Kyrian's weapon. The captain gave the order, and the Indomitable let loose. A shimmering wave of energy burst from the ship, washing over the Kyrian fleet. Their anomaly generators whined and screeched. The discordant sound of machinery pushed beyond its limits. One by one, the generators overloaded and exploded, ripping through the Kyrian ships in blossoms of fire and debris. The Indomitable surged forward, her sparrows launching in a deadly swarm. They tore into the crippled Kyrian vessels, their weapons finding every weakness, every vulnerability. The Kyrian fleet crumbled, their formation shattering as they tried desperately to flee. But there was no escape from the Indomitable's wrath. She pursued them relentlessly, her guns firing until the last Kyrian ship was nothing more than a field of shattered wreckage drifting in the cold void of space. It was a monumental victory, a turning point that proved humanity's resilience and ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. But, as Daniel said, it was only the beginning. The Kyrians, reeling from their defeat at Sirius, grew more desperate and ruthless in their tactics. No longer content to face the Indomitable head-on, they struck at softer targets, civilian transports, remote colonies, medical ships. They hoped to break humanity's resolve to shatter our spirit with 1,000 cuts. The crew of the Indomitable responded as they always had, with unwavering courage and determination. They escorted convoys, patrolled trade routes, and hunted down Kyrian raiders with a relentless fury. But the toll began to mount. The long months of constant warfare, the endless cycle of battle and loss weighed heavily on even the most stalwart of the ship's crew. They had stared into the abyss for so long, fighting against the darkness, that some began to wonder if they would ever see the light again. Yet even in those bleakest of moments, The Indomitable pressed on. Her crew drew strength from each other, from the unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of war. They remembered the oaths they had sworn, the duty that had called them to this fight. The cantina falls silent as Daniel pauses, the weight of his memories hanging heavy in the air. He takes a deep breath, his eyes distant, as he recalls the fateful mission. Captain Hale gathered the team in the Indomitable's briefing room. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the schematics of the Kyrian supply depot. Hale's face was grim as he laid out the plan, his voice steady despite the enormity of the task before them. "This is a covert operation," he said, his gaze sweeping over the assembled soldiers. "We'll be inserting via stealth shuttle, breaching the depot's perimeter at its weakest point. Once inside, we'll split into 2 teams. Alpha Team will secure the bio-weapon sample, while Bravo Team sets the charges to destroy the rest." The room was silent, the only sound the hum of the ship's engines. Every face was set in determination, a steely resolve in their eyes. They knew the risks, knew that this mission was likely a one-way trip. But they also knew what was at stake. "This weapon could mean the end of humanity," Hale continued, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. "We cannot allow it to be used against our people. This is our chance to strike a blow against the Kyrians, to show them that we will not go quietly into the night." He paused, his eyes meeting each of his soldiers in turn. "I won't lie to you. The odds are against us, but I have faith in each and every one of you. You are the best of the best, the bravest of the brave. Together, we will succeed." Sergeant Rain helped a young private barely out of training adjust his helmet. "Stick close to me, kid," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "We'll get through this together." As the stealth shuttle slipped away from the Indomitable, the team sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. They knew the dangers that lay ahead, knew the sacrifices they might be called upon to make, but they also knew that they were fighting for something greater than themselves, for the very survival of their species. The shuttle glided through the void, its cloaking device rendering it invisible to the Kyrian sensors. As they approached the supply depot, a sense of tension filled the cabin. This was it, the moment of truth. With a soft thud, the shuttle docked with the depot's airlock. The team moved with practiced efficiency, securing the entrance and moving swiftly into the heart of the facility. So far, their presence remained undetected. As they approached the central storage area, Captain Hale raised a fist, signaling the team to halt. He turned, his face illuminated by the dim emergency lighting. "This is where we split up," he said, his voice low. "Alpha Team, with me. Bravo Team, set the charges and prepare for extraction. And remember, no matter what happens, the mission comes first." With a nod, Sergeant Rain led Bravo Team down a side corridor, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. They moved with purpose, planting the explosives at key structural points. They were the best of the best, and failure was not an option. As they worked, a sudden burst of weapons fire echoed through the facility. The Kyrians had discovered their presence. Over the comms, Captain Hale's voice crackled with static. "Alpha Team is pinned down. We have the sample, but we're cut off from the extraction point." Rain's jaw tightened, a cold determination settling over him. "Captain, this is Bravo Team. We're on our way. Hold tight, sir." He turned to his men, his eyes hard. "You heard the captain. Let's move." As they raced through the corridors, the sounds of battle grew louder. They burst into the central chamber, weapons blazing, and were met with a wall of Kyrian fire. The air was thick with the stench of ozone and burning metal as they fought their way towards Alpha Team's position. But the Kyrians were relentless, pouring in from all sides. One by one, Bravo Team fell, their blood staining the cold metal floor. Rain fought with the fury of a man possessed, his rifle spitting death as he covered his fallen comrades. In the end, only Rain remained, his armor scorched and battered, his body riddled with wounds, but in his hand he clutched the bio-weapon sample, the price of his brother's sacrifice. With a final burst of strength, he detonated the charges. the explosions ripping through the facility in a cascade of fire and shrapnel. And as the darkness claimed him, as he felt the life draining from his body, Sergeant Rain knew that he had done his duty. The mission had been a success, but the cost had been high. Daniel falls silent, his eyes haunted by the memories. Antares reaches out, placing a comforting hand on the old soldier's arm. "Their sacrifice will never be forgotten," he says softly. "They were true heroes." The cantina seems to fade away, the present blurring with the past. For a moment Daniel is back on the Indomitable, surrounded by the faces of his fallen brothers. He can almost hear their voices, their laughter, the unspoken bond that held them together through the darkest of times. Daniel's eyes narrow as he recalls the desperate mission. The Indomitable raced through hyperspace, her engines straining at the limits. Every member of the crew knew what was at stake. They had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. The fate of the entire galaxy hung in the balance. He takes another sip of his drink, his hand steadier now. "When we dropped out of hyperspace near the Kyrian research facility, the tension on the bridge was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone was on edge, knowing that the slightest mistake could mean the difference between victory and annihilation." Daniel's voice drops to a whisper. The facility was hidden in the heart of a dense nebula, its swirling gases and charged particles playing havoc with our sensors, but the Indomitable's crew was the best of the best. They managed to punch through the interference and locate the Kyrian base. He leans back, his eyes distant. Captain Hale wasted no time. He ordered the Sparrows to launch, their sleek forms darting out from the Indomitable's hangar bays. They were our vanguard, our first line of attack. Daniel's voice grows tense. The Kyrians were caught off guard by our sudden appearance, but they reacted quickly. Swarms of their fighters poured out from the base, their weapons spitting deadly energy. The Sparrows met them head-on, their pilots displaying the skills and courage that had made them legendary. He pauses, his eyes haunted. It was a furious battle, a swirling maelstrom of fire and debris. The Sparrows danced through the enemy formations, their linked forms tearing through the Kyrian ships like a hot knife through butter. But the Kyrians were tenacious, and they fought back with a desperate ferocity. Daniel's voice grows somber. "We lost many brave pilots that day, their lives snuffed out in an instant, but they bought us the time we needed. While the Sparrows kept the Kyrians occupied, Captain Hale led a strike team in a daring assault on the research facility itself." He takes a deep breath, his eyes shining with pride. "I was part of that team, along with some of the Indomitable's finest warriors. We breached the facility's defenses and fought our way inside, determined to find and destroy the Doomsday device." Daniel's voice grows tense again. "The Kyrians threw everything they had at us, from elite guards to automated defense systems, but we pushed forward, driven by a sense of purpose that transcended fear or doubt. We knew that failure was not an option." He pauses, his face grim. "When we finally reached the heart of the facility, we found ourselves face to face with the Doomsday device itself. It was a monstrous thing, a pulsing mass of dark energy and twisted metal. Just looking at it made my skin crawl." Daniel's voice drops to a whisper. "Captain Hale gave the order, and we set our charges. The Kyrians fought desperately to stop us, but we held them off long enough to arm the explosives. Then we ran like hell, knowing that we had only minutes before the whole place went up." He takes a shuddering breath, the memory still vivid in his mind. "We barely made it out before the charges detonated. The explosion was unlike anything I'd ever seen, a blinding flash of light that seemed to consume everything. The research facility, the Doomsday device, the Kyrian ships, all were vaporized in an instant." Daniel falls silent, his eyes distant. Antares leans forward, his voice soft. "And that was the end of it? The end of the war?" Daniel's voice trembles as he recounts the final desperate assault on the Kyrian research facility. Antares listens intently, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and horror. "The moon's surface was a hellscape of craters and jagged rocks, the perfect place to hide a secret weapon," Daniel says, his gaze distant. "As the Indomitable approached, the Kyrian defenses came to life, filling the void with a storm of laser fire and missiles. He describes the sparrows darting and weaving through the onslaught, their pilots pushing their skills to the limit. Explosions blossom in the vacuum, each one marking the end of a brave human life. Captain Hale was a man possessed, Daniel continues, his voice thick with emotion. He flew like a demon, evading shots that should have been impossible to dodge. His wingmen struggled to keep up, their formation slowly dwindling as the Kyrians picked them off one by one. Antares can almost see it in his mind's eye. The sleek, deadly sparrows dancing a lethal ballet amid the chaos, the Indomitable looming behind them like an avenging angel. They fought their way to the surface, skimming over the moon's rocky terrain at breakneck speeds. The anti-aircraft batteries filled the sky with flak, turning the sparrows' shields into incandescent halos. Daniel's hands shake as he describes the final approach to the facility, the sparrows weaving through a gauntlet of energy beams and plasma bolts. The Kyrians, desperate to protect their doomsday weapon, throw everything they have at the human fighters. But Captain Hale would not be denied, Daniel says, his voice filled with a fierce pride. He and his remaining wingmen blasted their way into the heart of the complex, their weapons tearing through the Kyrian defenses like a hot knife through butter. Antares leans forward, his heart pounding as Daniel recounts the final fateful moments of the assault. The sparrows, battered and scarred, hovering before the pulsing, malevolent form of the doomsday device. The countdown, ticking inexorably towards zero. Captain Hale didn't hesitate, Daniel whispers, tears glistening in his eyes. He knew what had to be done. With a final, defiant cry, he gunned his engines and rammed his sparrow into the heart of the device. The explosion, Daniel says, was like a second sun being born. The doomsday device vanished in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave tearing through the facility and reducing it to rubble. The few remaining Kyrian ships, caught in the blast, are torn apart like leaves in a hurricane. And just like that, it was over, Daniel says, his voice hollow with grief. The Indomitable limped away from the moon, her hull scarred and battered, her crew mourning the loss of their captain and so many brave souls. But they had done it. They had saved the galaxy at a cost that could never be repaid. After a long moment, Daniel raises his head, his eyes burning with fierce intensity. Captain Hale's sacrifice was not in vain. With the destruction of the doomsday device, the Kyrians' last hope for victory was shattered. He takes a deep breath, his voice steady and resolute. The Indomitable and her remaining crew fought their way back to human space, their hearts heavy with grief, but also filled with a sense of purpose. They had struck a blow against the Kyrians that would never be forgotten. Daniel's gaze grows distant as his mind drifts to the aftermath of the war. The Kyrian Empire fell soon after, its leaders scattered and its armies disbanded. The Galactic Council, once so dismissive of humanity, now looked upon us with newfound respect and even fear. He chuckles harshly, a sound devoid of humor. But the price of victory was high. The Indomitable was badly damaged in the final battle, her hull scarred and her crew decimated. Many of her surviving crew members were left with deep emotional and physical scars, the memories of the war haunting them for years to come. Daniel's voice grows somber, his eyes filled with deep sadness. And as for Earth, the birthplace of humanity, the Kyrians, in a final act of spite, unleashed a devastating bioweapon on our homeworld. Billions died, and the planet was left a barren wasteland, unfit for human life. Daniel looks up at Antares, his eyes fierce and unyielding. And that, my friend, is the true story of the Indomitable and her crew, a story of courage, sacrifice, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. He drains the last of his drink, his tale finally at an end. So when you return to your people, remember this. Humanity may have won the war, but we paid a terrible price, and we will never forget the heroes who gave their lives to ensure our survival. With that, Daniel stands, his shoulders squared and his head held high. He nods once to Antares and then walks away, disappearing into the crowded cantina, a living legend of a bygone age. Antares sits in silence, his mind reeling with the weight of the story he has just heard. He knows he will never forget this moment, nor the incredible tale of the Indomitable and her crew. and he knows the galaxy will never be the same, now that the true story of humanity's greatest warship has been told. The historian slowly rises from his seat, his legs unsteady. He looks around the dingy cantina, seeing it with new eyes. The patrons, who had seemed so rough and dangerous now, appear to him as survivors, each with their own tales of loss and triumph. Antares makes his way to the exit, his mind awhirl with thoughts of the future. He knows he must return to his people and share the story of the Indomitable. The galaxy must know of humanity's sacrifice and resilience. As he steps out into the grimy station corridor, Antares pauses, looking back at the cantina door. For a moment he can almost see the ghostly figures of the Indomitable's crew, their faces etched with the scars of war, but their eyes shining with undimmed spirit. "Thank you," Antares whispers, his voice barely audible over the hum of the station's systems. "Your story will live on. I swear it." With renewed purpose, the historian strides down the corridor, ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. The legacy of the Indomitable will be remembered, he vows. Humanity's indomitable spirit will never be forgotten. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.